All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, our 2025 preview and prediction for the Missouri Tigers. Looking at this coaching staff, Eli Drinkwitz through 5 seasons, 38-24 record. Kirby Morrill in his third year as the OC, and then defensive coordinator will be occupied by Corey Batoon, second season in that role. Pretty good offseason, 20th ranked high school class, and then 6th currently in the portal. Very underrated class for the Tigers. They went 10-3 last year, winning the Liberty Bowl. But, Nick, we both know this team significantly underachieved for what was expected last year, the roster they had put together coming into 2024. So 10 wins is a very good season, but there was certainly a lot more that could have been accomplished for Drinkwitz and squad. Moving to the offensive side of the ball, this is a group that, numbers-wise, pretty average. This is a group that I thought would be putting up 35 to 40 points per game with all they had at disposable. Brady Cook, Luther Burden, veteran offensive line, including a right tackle who ended up going early in the NFL draft. Everything was really made for this team, including, 2 transfer running backs as well. They were just loaded, right? Long story short, and they just failed to achieve a whole lot on this side, Nick, especially in conference play. You've seen them really struggle at times. In their 3 losses, they only had 291 yards per game. They got smoked against Texas A&M on the road. They struggled, 2 weeks early against Vanderbilt. Against Boston College, they struggled. It's just a common theme throughout the years. This offense did not produce a whole lot. And then against Alabama, they got shut out. I know that group was battling a lot of injuries, but they had no contingency plan in place at all. What was your thoughts on the performance last year, Nick, where this unit was just not that good unexpectedly?
So Missouri last year, they did end up playing in the Music City Bowl, not the Liberty Bowl, just a quick note, but similar level of bowl, nothing too crazy to write home about, considering this team had expectations of potentially making the playoffs based off the schedule they had last year in the roster. They return, I always advocate for winning your bowl games, but I think this team could have done better than that. And yes, injuries were certainly untimely, but getting shut out, on the road in the SEC at Alabama is a bit disappointing considering what happened with that Alabama team ultimately. And like you said, they struggled against Boston College, they struggled against some of these other teams. 28.9 points per game is certainly below what you were expecting given what they returned. They had Luther Burden, who was an absolute star at wide receiver. Brady Cook was coming back as a veteran experienced starter in the SEC, and I think Cook had a solid season last year, but now they move on. They bring in a new quarterback as Cook leaves. They had Nate Noel, who was a back they were really promising to bring over out of the portal, who I think he could have done a lot better than he did last year as well at times. So just a mixed bag on offense. This offense, it just disappointed compared to the expectations, in my opinion. This is a team that was still good, right? 10 wins is certainly nothing to snuff at, but I think this was a team that missed their window here as they're going to regress a little bit on offense, which was a bit disappointing if you're a Missouri fan, considering the offense really wasn't up to expectations last year. And if they're going to regress this year, it could be a tough pill to swallow if you're a Tigers fan.
And now we look at some of the additions they have for this upcoming season. Only 3 starters returned from that Music City Bowl team. They lose top 3 rushers, top 2 pass catchers. Both starting offensive tackles are gone. But again, I like what they did to replace these guys to start Brian Probola at quarterback on tape for Penn State. I was really impressed. Showcases nice, quick drop, a fast, snappy release. A pretty savvy player with his mobility. Excels as a runner, but can make throws on the run with, the impressive ability to throw at different angles. Showed he could throw it in the tight windows as well. He had pretty nice deep ball consistency and arm strength. The arm strength, I guess, would be more of an unknown. He can make throws at all levels, though, is what I saw. Tibby's decided what he can accomplish, but I think the kid can play ball. Nick, pretty good feel for the game at 6'2", 206. Obviously, Penn State used him at times in running packages. But he was forced to come in on the road against Wisconsin when Aller went down. And they were trailing at that point. That's a game that could have got away from them, and he went down and led them on a touchdown drive and put that one to bed in the second half. This kid can play football, Nick, and I think he's going to be a pretty adequate starter for Missouri.
I think this is a solid add of the portal. I think Probola is a really talented player that has a lot of high upside. I'm going to talk about that Wisconsin game because that's the best film that we have on him. Really was the best opportunity for him to go out there and show us what he could do. He was 11 of 13 for an 85% comp rate for 98 yards and a touchdown. That was a key touchdown drive that kept them in that game. Also had some meaningful minutes against Kent State where he was 6 of 9 for a 66% comp rate, 83 yards, a touchdown, and a pick in that game. The interception was a little sloppy, a bit wonky though against a subpar opponent, so I'm not going to look too far into that. At 6'2", about 205, 210, depending on where you look. I think the frame is really solid. The arm strength, I think, can be really good here as well. I think he'll slot in and be solid on this offense. I worry about some of the weapons he's throwing to. I know they added some decent weapons we'll talk about, but overall, this is a wide receiver room that loses some of its top star players. They got to replace that talent, but I think you plug in a quarterback here that's ready to take the next step forward. Doesn't have a whole lot of meaningful starting experience, but I think he's got the tools to work with to develop into a good starting quarterback.
His legs will most certainly be involved, much like Brady Cook's were over the past couple of seasons. Top addition here for this offense, Ahmad Hardy, star running back last year for Louisiana Monroe. As a freshman, he had 1,351 yards and 13 touchdowns. His tape was also really impressive. Good vision. I like the long speed. A pretty powerful runner as well. Good finesse runner. Does a good job on those stretch zone and inside zone plays. And, of course, that's something that Missouri likes to run a whole lot. Jamal Roberts got some reps late in the year, and he did pretty well, showcase good balance and burst. You have two freshmen, Marquise Davis and Brendan Haygood, rounding out the depth chart, Nick. I think they have a nice 1-2 punch in Hardy and Roberts, and again, Perbola is going to be involved so much in the run game that the lack of depth or experience in the backfield is probably not going to hurt them all that much.
If there's one thing I trust with Missouri's coaching staff, it's to evaluate talent out of the running back position in the portal here. They've added some great backs over the past couple of years. Nate Noel was just one of them last year. They've been able to really bring in a lot of different backs that were really talented from various levels all over of college football. So I have no concerns bringing Ahmad Hardy here, who I think could be really solid for this team. He had a great season last year at Louisiana Monroe. Was really solid for that team. 1,300 yards rushing, I think, is a really impressive number. The 13 touchdowns is really good as well. He was really good at ULM. I think this is a really solid add for them. And I trust the way they evaluate talent out of the portal in the running back position. They seem to continue to add great running backs over and over again. This just seems to be the next one they're going to plug in and turn out here. He's a bit younger than their previous ads, so they get probably 2 seasons out of him, which I think is a positive thing if you're a Tigers fan. I'm not concerned about this position. They seem to be able to bring in a lot of running backs, even if last year was a bit of a downturn and disappointing stat considering what you're used to.
Yeah, Cody Schrader, just a couple years back, was a superstar from them, coming from Truman State. So you're certainly right on par with that take with this coaching staff. Looking at the wide receiver group, a bit of a revampment here. Kevin Coleman comes over after being on this is now his 4th school in 4 years, which is, I don't even understand. But he's been a solid contributor to all of them. He had 100-plus targets out of the slot for Mississippi State last fall. He has speed, can make quick cuts, catches well in traffic. This is a good pass catcher here. Marquise Johnson made some big plays over the last couple weeks of the season. Should be a deep threat as an outside wide receiver. Nearly 200 yards for Joshua Manning last year. An ex-4 star is listed at 6'2", 210, a nice long strider of a good catch radius. Daniel Blood only caught 3 passes in 3 games last year. James Madison should really start to emerge with great body control and yak ability. They also have 3 top 250 ranked wide receiver recruits who should see time, led by Donovan Ulugbadi. Great hands and short area quickness. I think this is a good room here. They also get tight end Brett Norflit back. He's pretty notable. He's been a nice contributor the last 2 years. Nothing great, but again, I think there's some solid upside in this wide receiver room. Nick, what's your thoughts?
There is some solid upside. They do lose a lot, and there's some solid pieces here, though. I think Marquise Johnson's a solid player. 350 yards receiving last year, 14.1 yards per grab, and a touchdown for him, about 30 yards per game. Norfleet's been a solid tight end for them, 235 yards receiving last year, and 2 touchdowns. Decent production there. Joshua Manning had about 200 yards receiving and a touchdown last year. So nothing that jumps off the screen at you, but I think those are a couple solid receivers plus a solid tight end. They bring it back. I think Coleman still has something to provide out of the portal there. Not a bad ad. Maybe James Madison could step up and be a solid piece for this offense as well. Definitely a revamped unit that's looking to take a step back, but there are some solid pieces here.
Hey, look at the offensive line. A big-time addition here in Johnny Williams, 6'6", 320 from West Virginia. He's going to start in at left tackle. If you're looking for a guy to be a quiet breakout star, I think it's going to be him. He played nearly 250 snaps at left tackle last year in relief for Wyatt Millum, and he was very good for the Mountaineers, so a very encouraging player there. It means Caden Green, he's going to stay at left guard after a phenomenal season, but he does have that position versatility to kick out to tackle if need be. Connor Tollison has been an elite run blocker through 2 years. It's really yet to showcase improvements in pass protection, but he's going to be, anchoring down that center position with ease. Logan Reichert, 6'6", 340. Played sparingly last year. Is expected to step in at right guard. Great size, nice wide base. Should be a stout run blocker for them. And then Keegan Frost enters his 6th year of CFB. He's been a sturdy right tackle. Was good for Wake Forest last fall. I think this is a pretty good offensive line. I don't expect too much fall off here, and I could say this is the biggest strength of this unit. I don't think, again, they're going to have much fall off, and I think that might even grow a little bit this fall as well.
I think they certainly could potentially grow here. I do like the ads there. I think, they added Williams, which is a really solid ad. They added Trost as well, who was a solid ad out of the portal. Williams showed a lot in his limited reps there in relief. I think he was really solid. Caden Green, I think, is really good at left guard. Tolson's a good leader at center, a graduate senior, has been around the program for a while now. And then Logan Reichart could potentially step up and be a stronger asset at right guard. Overall, I think this is a good offensive line. I think it's, middle of the pack in the SEC, but I think it's certainly a unit that could really improve throughout the season and be a really strong unit come the end of the season.
Looking at the offensive verdict, the Tigers' offense shockingly regressed a season ago, and it leads us to speculate how it will be any different. I think you can expect to see similar numbers, though. I think Perbola can play, and his running skills will be put to frequent use. Supporting cast is solid, but this offensive line will make all things possible. Quite solid group here that can score 30 a game. I'm going to go with a modest grade of a B, though, Nick, and last year's performance, I think, has a big reason to do with that.
Yeah, I think a B is a fair for this unit right here. I think there is a lot of potential, right? But that's a keyword, potential. I think Hardy was a great add of the portal. I think Perbrula was a solid add as well. I think he can really step up and be good here. I like the add of Williams at left tackle there. I worry about the wide receiving group. This is a very young and inexperienced group that does not have a whole lot of reps. I think Norfleet's a great tight end. He'll take a step forward. Overall, I think a B is very fair for this offense. It's a good unit, just not a great unit.
Moving to the defensive side of the ball, another group that was pretty solid, but I think at the end of the day, still kind of disappointed. Picked up 9 portal entries from this side. They also returned 6 starters. Look at the defensive line. Zion Young, 6'5", 265, is a really stout run defender. Hasn't really brought much to pass rushing department, though, but did improve this past season. Returned a good, sturdy defensive tackle in Chris McClellan at 6'4", 325. He was pretty good in all areas. Sterling Webb was quite respectable in a backup role, but he'll step into the starting lineup this season. Marquise Graciel, 6'4", 325, finally saw some solid action in his third year on the team. 312-pound Jalen Marshall also expected to have a bigger role after being in the program for a little bit. Elias Williams, a 4-star in last year's cycle. He should really find a role on the D-line this fall with his added strength, along with some good length and mobility. Going back to the edge department real quick, though, Eddie Kelly has been a consistent run defender in his career, coming off his best career season in his first year with Missouri. Damon Wilson added from UGA, a former high-end 5-star recruit with great burst. Evident skills of pass rusher. Not considered a great run stopper, though, and even struggled with the Bulldogs a great bit in 2024. And I think Nate Johnson, this is a great add. He was an exceptional pass rusher for Appalachian State. Didn't play as much last season, so the numbers took a bit of a dive. But he really shines in a stand-up edge role with good burst and awareness. I think this is a good defensive line here. Increased pass rush production would be great. They were 50 in sacks last season. That's pretty good. With the loss of Johnny Walker, though, they're going to need somebody to step up, Nick. And I like some of these portal additions, especially if Wilson can come around and, play more like that 5-star billing.
Yeah, I think Wilson's a high upside gamble here from UGA, a guy that was really good in high school that still has a lot left to take. Nate Johnson was really good out of App State. I think he'd really be a big impact player early on. Want to see what he can do, get on the field and see what his production looks like. Zion Young was really good for this team last year. 42 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and 3 pass breakups. Really good numbers there. A guy I like a lot. Chris McClellan was equally at just as strong. 39 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks for him as well. Good numbers there. Sterling Webb was really good on the interior. 18 total tackles and a tackle for loss. Want to see more out of him in an increased role. And I think they made some solid moves. I think Justin Bodford will potentially step up as a guy that he can get a lot more out of this year. Jalen Marshall as well, a guy they want to see what his reps could look like. They made some nice moves. They added some nice pieces here. I do like this defensive line.
Now you look at the middle of this defense. Tristan Newsome was a mid-level starter. He was pretty poor in allowing yak in coverage last year. Wasn't all that stout in coverage. Added a great linebacker, though, in Jisiah Trotter. He also struggled in coverage. He was great versus the run. Only missed 7 tackles all year as a first-year starter for West Virginia. Khalil Jacobs was respectable in his 6 games after having a good productive season for South Alabama back in 2023. Nicholas Rodriguez only saw significant action against UMass, and he was phenomenal in his appearance there. Pretty good group here. They need to be less of a liability in coverage, though, in the middle. Big shoes to fill with the loss of Flagg and Hicks, though. The middle of the defense was kind of a sour point for me last year, Nick. I would say Flagg, as the leading tackler, played well. And Hicks, whenever he was on the field, kind of disappointed. So what kind of sky's the limit for this? I know it's a second-year defensive coordinator, so everyone collectively should be better. The middle of the defense has good potential, though.
There is some potential here. I'm a little worried about this unit, but I think there is some potential to grow. I think Newsome's a really solid player. 71 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, a sack, and a pass breakup for him. He was the second top tackler on the team, top returning tackler. Decent numbers there. I look at the 2 guys, Rodriguez and Jacobs. They both had okay numbers in limited appearance. 17 tackles for Rodriguez. Jacobs had 14 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. But I do think the film on Rodriguez against UMass was quite solid. I think Trotter was a solid add from West Virginia. He had some decent production as a younger player in that program. This is a unit that's still got some high upside, right? I think Newsome's a good experienced player that can certainly quarterback that defense and lead the way at linebacker. It's not a crazy unit. It's not going to jump off the page at you or anything like that, but I do think it's a unit that has some nice underlying talent.
Trotter is one of many guys that, the more casual fans of college football probably won't know when it comes to this portal class from Missouri, but it's another one that I think is really impressive, and, me and you both like, Nick, so I think, again, Missouri, a lot of guys here in the portal are very underrated players who can make a significant impact, and Trotter is just another one in that line of that. Moving to the secondary, across the board, they were pretty abysmal. They struggled in man, allowed way too much free space in zone, often weren't on the same page. Tackling in the open field was poor. I mean, it was just abysmal across the board for what was a veteran group, Nick. Against South Carolina, they got obliterated by Lenora Sellers, like 300-plus yards, allowing guys to be wide open. They couldn't cover against Texas A&M, where, it was just a free fall, where you're just waiting for the clock to hit zeros. That's how bad it was. So this secondary was just poor across the board. A couple of those veterans still returned. They need to be better, though. Drayden Norwood didn't have the season I thought he would at starting corner. Toriano Pride was a little bit better due to his 6 plays on the ball, but he still struggled in coverage and in tackling. Nicholas DeLoach was the poorest of the 3 corners, though, so all these guys need to improve. Dalen Carnell, a veteran safety, has been very good in coverage, though, his entire career working out of the slot. One of the lone bright spots for them in 2024 was Carnell. Marvin Burks was pretty disappointing of his performance. They added Stephen Hall, though, who's pretty good for Wazoo, and then a great safety in Jalen Catalon, who's been all over the place in his career, but he's coming off a phenomenal resurgent season for UNLV, showcasing his downhill run-stopping abilities along with being a great center fielder with good range. And they also picked up Moose Phillips from Virginia Tech. He's played a lot of snaps in his 2 years, but he's been pretty average for them. I think this group can be better top to bottom. They also picked up Santana Banner here late in the cycle. This secondary was abysmal, though, Nick. These guys struggled more than I thought they would. Do you think the additions of guys like Hall and Catalon can help improve them across the board?
The secondary was brutal last year, right? There's no way to beat it around the bush. This was a bad unit. They just did not have a lot of production last year. I think Carnell was solid, probably the best asset in the secondary for this team. 51 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 7 pass breakups. He was really good in coverage. Marvin Burks was not really good in coverage, but he was a good tackler. 66 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a pick, 2 pass breakups for him. Decent enough production. I look at Drayden Norwood. He's got to step up and be better this year. He had 34 total tackles, a tackle for loss, 2 picks, 3 pass breakups last year. DeLoach, he's got to be a lot better at coverage. 23 total tackles, 4 pass breakups for him. And then Toriano Pride, want to see what he can do. Maybe he can step forward. He had 2 touchdowns last year, or 2 interceptions, that is, including a pick 6, 4 pass breakups, and 22 total tackles. I think he could definitely step up and be a solid asset for this team this year. I look at the ads of the portal. They're not bad. I think Catalon is a guy that's been around college football for a while. Maybe he'll have one last good season. And Stephen Hall is a good veteran as well to add. These are 2 graduate players they added out of the portal to beef up that secondary. I'm still worried about it. I think it's a still weaker unit on paper, but I do think some of these guys could come around a little bit and improve this unit's standing.
And again, coming in last year, I thought it'd be a pretty dominant unit, so I think the potential is certainly there. So I wouldn't exactly say on paper they're poor, but if you look at the stats from last year, you'll certainly see that. And of course, the tape would even further back that. So secondary has potential. They only had 7 interceptions last year. And again, it's just the theme we saw across the board, Nick, is this team struggled in areas they should not have. And I think that's certainly very upsetting. And I'm sure Eli Drinkwitz and his staff are going to do everything they can to get back in sync. Looking at the verdict for this defense, respectable unit here from Missouri. D-line and linebacker group should provide a collectively good effort versus the run and pass rushing as well. But this secondary needs to have a big offseason in terms of positioning, communication, again, as they have the talent to put up better efforts. Should see a quality season out of this defense, but the tougher offenses got the best of them last fall. I think that might continue this year. I love the portal class, though, Nick, on this side. What do you think? A B is appropriate? What can I get up to?
Yeah, I think a B is appropriate. The stats look good on paper for this defense, but in the games they lost, they were completely dominated on the defensive side of the ball. So the stats don't always mean everything. They definitely had better stats against some of the weaker opponents in their schedule last year. I think the defensive line unit's good. I like some of the portal ads. I think Johnson's a great ad. I think Wilson's a phenomenal ad from UGA if he can reach his untapped potential. I worry about the secondary and the linebacking core still, but I think it's still a defense overall that's worthy of a B rating. Just an average defense. They're not flashy. They're nothing crazy, but I think they're going to be reliable against the bad teams and can struggle against the good teams.
Now, I don't want to fully diss the defense. Like you said to Nick, the stats need to be really thrown out the window. They shut out Murray State and Buffalo, gave up 3 to UMass. They played Iowa's backup quarterback in the bowl game. They still did play pretty good against some quality opponents in conference. But it was against weaker offenses. OU had a terrible O-line. Auburn didn't really do much at quarterback. So these numbers are the most skewed I've ever seen. Wouldn't you say? Quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely skewed. They're 20th in points per game, but like you said, there were 2 shutouts against bad teams and a 3-point performance from a weak team as well. That's really bringing down that 20 points per game. On defense, I think the pass yards per game, people might look at it and say, wow, you're trashing a secondary that's a top 20 secondary in terms of pass yards per game. on stat wise, that's not really what it was when you look at how they played against Alabama, when they played against Texas A&M. The secondary got ran off the field and just looked absolutely hopeless and lost. So I think the stats are just a little bit skewed in this. It's definitely a really weird thing, and it's normally I trust the stats on this one, but after watching the film, after breaking down this team, you can't really trust the stats on this one. This is a good defense from last year, but it's just missing some of those key pieces to be a great defense.
Yeah, 100%. Moving to the final verdict for Missouri, the schedule and the prediction here. Tigers really disappointed last fall off what was a really talented roster and failed to put it together, as out of the 10 Power 4 opponents they played, 9 of those games were either losses or decided by one score. It's very concerning, and showing more cohesion is important. I think they have a good offense by an intriguing young quarterback and a defense that is in store for improvement. I'm still going to go with a 7-5 record here, Nick. This team last year, again, if you can't accomplish much with what they had, I don't really know what to expect for this upcoming season, especially with an equally as tough SEC slate. They get some freebies in non-conference again that are probably going to skew those numbers once more, including that continued series with UMass. 7-5 for me. I think this can be a respectable team. Against South Carolina and Alabama at home, I think they can be competitive. I do have them knocking off the Aggies on November 8th, but I have them losing 2 in a row to end the season. They'll make a bowl game, and I think this will be a fun team come Bowl Mania, as they shouldn't have too many opt-outs, I wouldn't think. Intriguing squad, I would say, but I still have a sour taste from last year, and that's leading me just not to be very high on them.
Fun and intriguing, I think, is a good way to talk about this team, but I really think they're just not going to reach the heights that their fans hope for. I'm at 6-6. I think they're going to lose to A&M. I think A&M, I'm a little bullish on A&M still, but I think they'll be able to win that matchup. The schedule, it's tough, right? There's some tough matchups in here. At Oklahoma, at Auburn are certainly not easy games. At Arkansas, a rivalry game is very difficult as well, especially if these two teams are both fighting for bowl, eligibility. That's always an interesting one. South Carolina, a very good team this year. And then obviously Alabama, they're a very talented team. Although I will say the last time Alabama played out in Columbia, it was, I believe, the only game in Nick Saban's tenure that they did not cover the spread in a season opener. I know it was COVID, so it's a little bit different. It's not like the typical cupcakes game you open your season with, but Alabama played some tough opponents in previous years. They played Clemson, they played Florida State one year, they played Miami another year. So not covering the spread on the road in Columbia, maybe that's something to keep an eye on. Just if you're interested in betting potentially, Alabama struggled in Columbia last time they were out there a little bit in terms of covering what probably was a lofty spread, probably 20 plus. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. The UMass series, kind of interesting, kind of funny. They play UMass. I think UMass just looking to fill out the schedule until they join the MAC. They should certainly beat down on what is still a very bad UMass team. I do like some of the pieces on this team on both sides of the ball. I think they did some good portal work. I think Drinkwitz is a good coach. I think he is putting something together solid, in a place that doesn't traditionally perform very well in the SEC or in college football as a whole. Being 38-24 through 5 seasons is a very respectable mark, but if you couldn't get in the playoffs with the roster you had last year, and this roster is significantly downgraded compared to that roster the year before, I'm immediately expecting a massive fall off. I think this team is a 6-win team right now, just based off where they are.
That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.